Thank you for clicking on the video, and welcome back to the channel if you're a returning viewer. If you are a first-time viewer, I want to thank you guys as well for checking out my content. I appreciate you clicking on my video. My name's Matt, and this is Secondhand Home Theater, where I talk about various home theater topics, but I generally do it through the lens of buying used equipment and used items here in my home theater, with an emphasis on high-end, high-quality used items and equipment that I get for pretty dirt cheap prices. And here today I'm talking about a more generalized topic, not so much an individual item. This is going to be more of a talking head opinion piece, which I suppose all my videos or most of my videos are like that. But this one here today is more about just a generalized kind of topic in regards to home theater and projectors more specifically. And that is the fact that I don't think resolution on your projector, so what actual resolution the projector is the most important thing you should be looking at. I think you should be looking at a few other things maybe first before you look at resolution. So if you want to see what I pick as things that are more important than resolution, then stay tuned. So when I'm talking about things that I put kind of in front of resolution or above resolution in terms of image quality in picking a projector, this is really more dedicated to just that, to projectors. There is a little crossover, I suppose, into like TVs, but TVs are just different. I think a few things may cross over there, but I think most things in this video are really for projectors, not for TVs. So I want to put that out there first. Now, when I'm talking about resolution, I'm talking about the actual image scaling, I guess you could say, of the projector. So I'm talking about 4K, 1080p, or even in some cases 720p. And my opinion on this is that that resolution, whether it's 4K, 1080, 720, whatever, isn't the most important thing to look at when you're looking to buy a home theater projector. To me, there's definitely some other things, some other aspects you should look at and take into account on a projector before you look at the just generalized resolution of the projector. And I think depending on everybody's kind of personal ideas and interests and what they like and kind of prioritize, I guess, in terms of picture quality, they'll kind of like float around and maneuver these around in different kind of orders depending on what they, think and what they like. So this is in no particular order, of what I'm picking here. Starting off with number one, and a big one for me, is the contrast ratio, and more importantly, Intrascene contrast ratio. So in just a very generalized definition coming from me here on this, contrast ratio is just how bright can an image get and how dark can an image get, and how much space is there kind of between those 2 points. More or less, that's kind of how I define it here in terms of like my home theater and what I look at. Ideally, in theory, the larger the number that you see in terms of contrast ratio when you're looking up a projector, the better it should be. Now, this number also has some weird factors that play into it, because a lot of manufacturers will pick contrast ratio numbers based on the brightest pure white point in an image all the way down to the darkest pure black point in an image when you have, say, a perfectly white screen and a perfectly black screen. And so it's taking those very extreme points in that spectrum and saying that that's the contrast ratio. And while that may indeed be true, that may not be what you actually see when you're sitting in a home theater watching a projector with an image projected on a screen. While contrast ratio in general is important, what I like to kind of focus in on more is Intrascene contrast ratio. And I've talked about this in a few of my other videos in the past. Intrascene contrast ratio kind of boils that big number down a little bit more specifically, and it takes into account the brightest point in an image and a darkest point in an image when that image is on the screen at the same time. A good kind of test thing to look at here is like a checkerboard pattern, where you have a black square and a white square in a checkerboard pattern across the screen. And you can get an image like that online in various places, or you can get it on basically every kind of home theater calibration test disc, like Spears and Munsell, the AVS 709 disc, Digital Video Essentials. Pretty much anything has some form or fashion of a checkerboard pattern like that. The interesting contrast ratio is that brightest peak and that darkest valley in the image at the same time on the screen, what you're seeing. And that is a much more real world, realistic number and image that you're gonna see when actually watching content. Because face it, how many times outside of very specific scenes are you gonna see a pure white screen on your projector screen or a pure black screen? And I think a lot of times you may see the full black screen more often, like with end credits or a fade to black or something. But even in that, that's what, like a very small percentage of the content you watch is going to be a completely just blank colored screen, whether it's white or black or another color in between. You're generally going to see mixes of colors and luminances and brightness values that are different all on the screen at the same time. So to me, Intrascene contrast ratio is one of the most important things to look at when buying a projector. And it doesn't matter if it's 4K, 1080p, or even 720p. If you have a very high quality unit that can give you a really good, really high Intrascene contrast number, that image, at least to me, is gonna look way more pleasing and way better to your eye than a lower Intrascene contrast number with a higher resolution at like 4K versus say 1080 or 720. That Intrascene contrast ratio is one of the most important things to look at when buying a projector over just generalized resolution of the unit you're looking at. Going along with that, and again, this could kind of jump up to the top or kind of fall down lower depending on, you know, your preference in terms of image. The next thing I think that should be kind of looked at more critically than the actual resolution is the actual color reproduction. How accurate can the projector, regardless of resolution, create and replicate colors? While maybe a native resolution that's higher and more pixels or whatever may seem better to the eye, if the colors are all out of whack and you can't really dial in the colors to look realistic, how much do you really want to watch that image? I would much rather have a 1080 or a 720 projector that can pretty much reproduce colors flawlessly versus a 4K HDR unit that's having trouble reproducing colors and everything looks kind of messed up and out of whack. To me, the lower resolution picture with the accurate color palette is much more pleasing to look at. And as a side note, when you get into these higher end older units, like my Knoll LED, like my Christie projector I have here, and like some other ones that are floating out there, you know, digital projection and Sim 2 projectors and things like that, because at the time they were created, there was no standard for HDR content and expanded color gamuts. They were kind of boxed in to hit D65, which is the standardized just color palette for SDR. But they can actually expand out because there's more colors that they can reproduce there. They just didn't have a standard or any sort of content that kind of followed that. So you can definitely get HDR and other content in those expanded color gamuts. You just kind of have to go about it a little bit different to get there because that's not what those units were initially made for. I would definitely take a lower resolution projector, be it 720 or 1080, that can reproduce colors better and ultimately have that interesting contrast ratio that's better versus a more modern 4K projector that can't do those things. So again, that's just my opinion, but those are two things there that I definitely think are more important. Now, the last thing on my list is sharpness or like clarity in the image. And this has a lot of factors at play. Not only is it the actual construction of the unit, the components in the unit, you know, so how is it actually built? A lot of higher end projectors especially, they have interchangeable lenses. And so certain lenses are kind of on the lower quality kind of end of the spectrum, and then other lenses are on the higher quality end of the spectrum. And so if you can get a higher quality lens, obviously that's going to give you higher quality image uniformity and better sharpness, better clarity. But as a general rule, I would much rather have a lower resolution projector, a 1080p or a 720 projector, let's say, that is much sharper and has a much cleaner, more clear image over a 4K projector that can't match that level of sharpness or image clarity. There you go. There's my kind of 3 things that I think are a little more important to look at over just generalized resolution when you're looking to buy a home theater projector. Now, I'm sure there'll be some discourse and some people either in the comments here or if you look online in other forums, you know, they'll talk and bring up different points and say some of these things don't really apply anymore because modern projectors and technology have evolved enough. And you know, I can understand their points, I guess. But at least for me, in my experience, these older high-end units that are lower quality in terms of resolution have bested more modern projectors in virtually every aspect, in my opinion. Now, again, that's my opinion. I'm not saying that runs for everybody, and my projectors are somewhat specific. These are all DLP projectors, and so DLP versus, you know, a Lycos, a DILA, LCD, they're all going to have their little bits of difference, you know, in there. But to me, the 3 things I listed, the sharpness, the intrascene contrast ratio, and the color reproduction, I think are way more important than generalized resolution of a projector. And with that, I'm going to wrap this video up. This is a small sample of some of the stuff I do here on my channel. I definitely go into other topics and other things here as well. But if you did like what I talked about here today, definitely consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. I'm getting real close to 2,000 subscribers on my channel. It'd be really cool to have that happen before the end of the year. No pressure, but that would be a cool thing to have. Also, before this video wraps up, definitely leave a comment down below and let me know whether or not you agree with kind of my ideas of what's more important than resolution. You know, let me know what you guys look for in a home theater projector. You know, I'd love to hear everyone's opinions on all that. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye here today. Definitely be on the lookout. I've got more content in the works. I'm working on finishing up my projector screen series with the Elite Screens material. I've got some other stuff going on in the background here that's in the works. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And so finally, I'm going to end this outro and I'm going to say thank you to everyone. I really do appreciate it. And I will see you the next time in the next video right here on Secondhand Home Theater.